Hi everyone, welcome to our weekly Q&A session. And today it's my pleasure to welcome here our coach Alina. It's a great pleasure to always have you here, Ali. So how are you today?
Thank you, Veronika, for inviting me. I'm doing really well. I hope that you're also, enjoying the pre-Christmas season.
Right. Yeah. We are before the call. We are just talking about. She just set up her Christmas tree, and I had to set it up like already almost 3 weeks ago because my kids already like 2 months were asking like when we are going to have our Christmas tree. We want to have the Christmas tree, and so we had to set it up already. But
Yeah.
okay, I think we can start with our questions. There were already a few on the YouTube before we started, so I copied it here. And we have a question from TC. Hello, everyone. Happy holidays to you all. Hello, and happy holidays to you also. Progress in insomnia, from what I'm hearing and experiencing, is never linear and takes time. What were your first signs of progress that you noticed? And it continues. For me, I noticed that I'm not having heart palpitations and vivid weird dreams. My sleep has been more consistent and less all nighters. And I'm moving away from constantly thinking about sleep. So, what are your thoughts on this, Ali?
Yeah, to me that sounds like a really great, progress for this person. And I just want to say that each person is going to have their own kind of like unique pattern of recovery. So for someone, the first signs of a progress could be decreased hyperarousal, increasing like some amount of sleep. Maybe the depth of sleep becomes like a more, like deeper. But for someone else, it might be actually more on this. Um, kind of like the side of like how they view wakefulness, how they relate to those things, that so their relationship with things changes. It might not necessarily reflect in terms of the sleep itself or how anxious they are, or but their views on those things, they're already kind of like shifting, and sometimes that also a good sign of progress. So I just want to kind of like for this person and everyone else just say that um, whatever their journey, however it unfolds, is all okay. Meaning that someone can have like I usually, uh, mm, based on my observations of different recovery processes, I usually talk about like three major types. So the first type is kind of like I call it like slow start. It's when we are just doing like more education, understanding what is going on with us, but there is not much change happening in the actual, how the nights are going for us. But there is already like a big fundamental understanding is, being created. And then and this kind of slow start can last for some time. For some people, it can take like even months until something like starts like clicking in terms of like how the nights go. And that's when they kind of like, their recovery progresses. For someone, it could be what I call like quick start, which is more about like they might have like a very initially like a big change in, they might start sleeping better, feeling better, and so on and so forth. But that still doesn't mean that they are kind of like will not experience speed bumps on their way, because speed bumps, like, it's a part of everyone's journey, as I have observed it. And the third type is more of a chaotic one. It's like random. So it's kind of right from the beginning, there is a mix of it seems like things are getting better, but then it's again like, throws us into another kind of like a wakefulness episodes, and more fear or panic or hyperarousal. And sometimes it's difficult to pinpoint any sort of like pattern there. So that's also like another way to start this recovery process. So just wanted to kind of like normalize for everyone that whatever pace their recovery unfolds,
Mhm.
all okay. I hope that
Yeah,
clarifies. But
absolutely.
what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I you explained it really really nicely, and I would just add like for many people, what I have noticed is in their recovery journeys that at the beginning they have a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, many physical symptoms, and when this all subsides, when the hyperarousal goes down, it doesn't have to necessarily translate into better sleep, and now they kind of hit like this plateau where they are not having these really strong hyperarousal symptoms, but they feel calm. And now they start to wonder, okay, I don't have this strong anxiety, which they saw as an obstacle to their sleep. So why am I not sleeping? And very often at this stage, they start to question the journey. Is this really okay? Is it everything fine with me? Am I the only one that cannot be held because they don't see like improvement in the terms of sleep. They still
Yeah.
experience a lot of all-nighters. They experience a lot of wakefulness, and I just wanted to highlight that this is very normal. The improvement in terms of sleep for many people, it's really at the end of this process. What is important is how you navigate this wakefulness, how you navigate the discomfort, and how you basically befriend wakefulness, right? So it's very, very normal, and you just need to continue what you have been doing before or what you're doing now, basically. So
Yeah,
this,
yeah. This is a really good point, and I'm glad that you kind of like highlighted the delay that happens. Like
yes,
first, our relationship with things starts, and more often than not, there's actually like a delay when it reflects into sleep. And just one more thing before we maybe go to another question is that um, for anyone who are finding themselves in this kind of like maybe like a little bit like frustrated situation that where they don't really see much improvement in terms of sleep, I find it really helpful to not base their progress on sleep outcome as such, because sleep is something that we cannot control. So
mm,
every time we set it as a goal, it already kind of recipe for future frustration,
right.
because we cannot you know since we cannot control when and how we fall asleep,
Mhm.
having a goal in terms of sleep and measuring our process based on how many hours we sleep, how deep it was, how refreshed we feel the next day, this can be very pressuring to us, and that's why we might start feeling that, oh, I'm not actually recovering, even though recovery is already happening, but the progress does not look the way we would expect it to. Oftentimes the progress is very subtle. It starts with small changes in how we show up to these experiences rather than the actual uh, the sleep outcome. So if possible for anyone, it really helps to think of sleep itself more as like a byproduct, like a
Mhm.
side effect of this process, not the I know it sounds strange because we are really in this process like because we want to stop suffering with like regarding sleep, but looking at it as more as this kind of like a side effect or a byproduct rather than the actual goal that
Mhm.
can help us like
Mhm.
um, put us on the right track here.
Yeah, absolutely. I when you are mentioning this, I really like how Coach Michelle framed it. What was really helpful to her it was to differentiate between short-term and long-term goals.
Oh yeah.
And the long-term goal naturally is sleep, like which happens as a byproduct of our inner work of all these short-term goals that would be how we navigate the difficult moments, how we navigate in wakefulness, how we navigate the anxiety,
Yeah.
and when we don't when we set how we respond as a goal rather than how that it doesn't really exist in the given moment, it just lowers the expectation from us, like the immediate expectation, or I should be sleeping now, I should not experience the anxiety, I should be free from it in this given moment. So when we just shift the goal rather to be how I navigate this, how I am with the anxiety right now, how I make the wakefulness more bearable, more tolerable for me in a given moment. This is much more helpful, and
In the long term.
eventually it leads us to this long-term goal, which is the byproduct, which is the sleep eventually. So
Yeah.
let's wrap up this part. And but there is a really nice question from the same person from TC, and so we answer all the questions from this person is, and then the question for me would be, what are productive ways to build acceptance and letting go what you can't control?
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts, Ali?
Mm. Well, to me, acceptance isn't something that we can execute as a task. Acceptance to me is more like a state that
Mhm,
sometimes we can that can be more accessible to us, sometimes less accessible to us.
mhm,
So it's not like I want to kind of like because I noticed the word like productive ways as
mhm,
if there is some sort of like a methodology in order for us to deploy acceptance, right? But in reality, what I find acceptance itself is more about like a way of living life, meaning that acceptance is about this kind of like fluidity in finding what feels more acceptable in this moment. So sometimes we might realize like, you know what, I feel inside of me the resistance to, let's say, experience wakefulness, and there's nothing I can do about it. We can actually let that be that way for now,
mhm.
and accept the fact that we are not accepting in the moment, you
Yes.
know. Those are like subtle nuances of navigating acceptance and seeing it as like we don't have to force it. So if by productive ways a person is looking for some foolproof step-by-step guide that will make sure that we are accepting, that sometimes can come across as more like a forceful approach, and acceptance cannot be forced. So it's more about just seeing like, okay, what about this situation I actually can accept,
Mhm,
and allowing non-acceptance to exist as well. Because um, gradually, as we are keep showing up to the experiences and uh, treating ourselves kindly throughout it,
mhm,
the acceptance becomes more and more available with time. And
mhm,
this is why oftentimes people start with this kind of like complete I would say like mistrust, in the sense that I cannot imagine myself ever accepting
mhm,
a completely sleepless night. And this is what I started with. For me, it was like, this is not acceptable under any conditions.
mhm,
Like I cannot imagine a world where I would just spend like casually like a night fully awake, right?
mhm,
At first, it was not available to me. And if I was trying to force myself to accept that right at that point when I was not ready, that would be just like self torture. And that's why I just let it be as it was. And with time, the more I got to experience wakefulness in a different way, I started realizing, hey, maybe it's not as bad as I initially pictured it, you know? So it kind of like the acceptance became more and more available to me. But there
mhm,
is a process that takes place. So I would say everything what we are talking about here, letting go of trying to control the outcome, treating ourselves kindly no matter what happens, is actually one of those kind of quote unquote productive ways
mhm,
to make acceptance possible for us.
mhm,
There is no special magic formula. It is a journey, and we
mhm,
cannot skip chapters in it. Like, meaning that we cannot like find shortcuts to bypass
mhm.
the experience part and navigate right to acceptance. Acceptance becomes also like as a kind of like also like a byproduct of the journey as well, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely. I would just add that to acceptance helps us really to understand the topics, to have the education, the knowledge, because when there is no mystery, when there is nothing like peculiar, like why are we experiencing this? Why am I having this sleepless night? It's very unnatural to accept when we think like this is wrong, this is not supposed to happen, this is absolutely terrible, I'm going to feel awful. But when we just understand, my brain is doing it because it allows me. It wants to keep me safe. It thinks there is a threat out there. When there is this different narrative, the acceptance is much more accessible to us, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we need to understand that we just like you described it really, really nicely. That we start with total resistance, and from this total resistance, we start to build the capacity to tolerate, to accept, and it becomes. I think that this comes from you. That this is a dance, and we dance between acceptance and complete resistance.
Yeah.
And when we are here at the total resistance, we with the education, we just start to just dip our toe into acceptance just for a moment. How does it feel like in this given moment to be awake at night? I know my brain is doing this just to protect me. I'm here in my bedroom, in my own bed, in the coziness and the warmth under the duvet, and physical. I'm really safe. So when I did in this given moment, I'm really safe. But then you still run to resistance. But I don't like it. I don't want to. I don't like the way how I feel the next day. But and you stay again for a while in this resistance. But again, the next night you try to stay a bit longer. Like, okay, the moment I experienced last night wasn't so terrible. So okay, in this given moment, um, I can watch a TV. I can do something that I like, and we in this way we are starting to grow in the capacity to tolerate the discomfort. I don't like it, but still I can make it bearable to me, right? And in this way, we eventually might find ourselves that we experience uh, an all-nighter, when then we experience a night full of wakefulness, but we don't consider it as a disaster. We
Mhm.
consider it like, okay, I didn't like it. It's really important to note that we don't have to like it to overcome it, right? So, so we just uh, uh, we just take it as it is, as a fact, as stating, okay, outside is like 72 degrees Fahrenheit. It is a fact. I was awake, but we do not judge it. We do not add any emotion towards it, and we take it as it is. Okay, the night was bumpy, but what can I do with it? How can I spend the day in a way that the night doesn't affect me the way it used to? So I
Yeah.
just wanted to add this,
Yeah.
and
He
we
said.
thank you. And we have a question from uh, Mars 2097. Hello, girls. Hello. I have a question. Do I still have insomnia if I, even with all my knowledge about it, still have fear sometimes during the day that I won't be able to sleep and have all nighter? So, what are your thoughts, Ali?
Yeah, I would say that I'm assuming maybe this person already maybe has already seen the kind of like progress in terms of like the sleep itself, but there is still kind of like the lingering fear that is kind of like maybe on background during the day. And I just want to say that this is completely normal, that as we are moving through this journey, the fear does not dissipate completely at once.
Mm,
It's a process, and for me it took a very long time until like even like random thoughts stopped appearing in my mind, so for the time being it helps to accept those intermediary stages where fear might still show up itself, like maybe during the day or maybe closer to evening, when just a random thought appears, or an emotional reaction comes up. Those things, they are not the problem, and recovery is possible with those experiencing happening from time to time. So we don't need to look at them as an obstacle to recovery, because then once we identify them as an obstacle to recovery, what we are going to do next is that we are going to try to problem solve them. And then, because we cannot force ourselves not to think about sleep or not to worry about it, like not like we cannot force ourselves not to have an emotional reaction, right?
mhm,
If it happens, it happens, right? But then once it does happen, we interpret it as some sort of like a danger to our recovery overall, and then we
mhm,
start fixating on it. And the more we fixate on that, the more kind of like repetitive it becomes. So we kind of feel stuck, like having the same experiences over and over and over. But realizing that a recovery happens alongside those experiences. It
mhm,
doesn't happen, or it's not impossible for recovery to continue, even though there is like those momentary like feelings that happen during the day. As you said in your previous answer, Veronica, that it's really about how we choose to show up to this experience, how we choose to
mhm,
navigate it. It's not a problem that it arises in the first place. It's a normal way our fear dissipates. It never goes from 100 to 0. It goes through different intensities, different frequencies of it. And at some point we might even like kind of like let go of the idea of like having this kind of like, okay, when I can consider myself recovered, because this person asked like, do I still have insomnia? So I'm assuming here that they might be kind of like trying to understand like if there is recovery happened or it's still happening, or is it's like, kind of like slowing down, whatever, right? But in reality, recovery happens so quietly,
Mhm.
so sadly, that there is actually no one moment or one this kind of like event where we can say, oh, okay, so now from now on I'm recovered, because
Mhm.
it's such a gradual process. Like for me, really, I cannot even name a month when it would like when it really kind of dissipated. It was such a gradual process for me that the fear just stopped to show up. But I don't know when exactly it happened, because I was no longer minding it to appear, so I was not really paying attention whether it's there or not. So I don't know if this is something that how you experience your process, Veronica.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I just wanted to say, like, I really liked like how one of our students framed it, and she said like insomnia. You can't really pinpoint like when it ends. It's she said like it basically slips out of the back door, and there are
Mm,
no big fanfare. Like there is no like big event, like no fireworks, no big fanfare. Like, oh, I'm recovered. Insomnia is gone. Right? You just shift towards living your life alongside insomnia, and until you realize that insomnia is not there anymore. Right?
yeah,
And this is also helpful for many people because some people they think there has to be like this exact day, like, okay, I'm recovered now, right?
or an aha moment, some big revelation, like, oh, right, now,
Exactly.
okay, I got it, right?
Me. Yeah, it's for most of the people, and it doesn't happen in this way. And I have to, or I would like to share one of my experiences. And I felt like I was recovered, or I felt like for a long time I've been sleeping well. I didn't have any fearful thoughts about insomnia. And what happened? I didn't know what I was doing. Maybe I was just washing dishes, like some random stuff, nothing related to sleep. I wasn't making a bed or whatever. And I got this thought, like, what if one of my children would get insomnia?
Mm,
And in that moment, this one thought triggered such a huge wave of anxiety. Like, oh my goodness, I don't want my children to suffer so much like I had to. And in that moment, I was literally really overwhelmed with such a strong emotion. But then, thanks to what I have learned here, I just paused, like, okay, this is just a thought. Of course, I had a really strong reaction because it's really a difficult and heavy emotion that is bringing. Like, it really reminded me of all the difficulties I had to go through in my insomnia journey. So uh, I started to rationalize. Okay, I didn't push away this thought. I accepted it, and I rationalized in a way. Okay, if my children had to go through this difficulty through insomnia, they have the best mother in the world that can help them to overcome it.
yeah.
So when I
So they're
rationalize,
safe with
yes,
you. Yeah.
relief. Okay, I can control that they will never have insomnia, but I can help them with to go to overcome it.
Mhm.
So and in this way, I it calmed me down. Like, okay, it is fine, it's safe, and I have never ever again had this thought, or actually, I can have this thought. I'm talking about it right
Yeah.
now, but I don't have this emotion uh,
Fearful, yeah.
that is large trait. So because I processed it in this way, and similarly, when you had it was. It was so. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking for the name. Maris, you can have these thoughts, but these fears. But when you don't latch onto them, when you just process them, when you normalize them, you can even rationalize with them. Then you can even say like, okay, I have overcome insomnia already, most likely, so I can do it again if it ever happens, right? So I hope this was helpful. And now we have a question from Annie. Annie, can you talk more about when you had a string of bad nights and you are so overtired that your body goes into hyper mode and won't let you? This is the one thing people never talk about. Thanks. So, what are your thoughts, Ali?
I can just say that I really relate to this experience because I had that particular thing happen to me many times on my journey, and I genuinely hated those nights when I was like, I'm so tired, and yet my brain just won't let me sleep. It was like, come on, it's already there. There's already tiredness. I'm not like, because there were some nights when I didn't feel sleepy even, like I was just felt alert, not
Mm-hmm,
tired at all.
mm-hmm,
And then I would like, stay awake at night. But then there were nights when it felt like, oh my God, I just physically cannot like move, but my brain just keeps me awake. And for a very long time I also struggled with that. And it might sound like a really um, kind of maybe anticlimactic, but it's actually again accepting that some nights we might feel that way, and that's also okay. Some nights we might actually hate quite a lot, and
mm-hmm,
it's okay to dislike them.
mm-hmm,
um, in a way, accepting how challenging this certain experiences can be can take away a little bit of heaviness from them, in the sense that we know that yes, it's okay for me to dislike this experience,
mm-hmm,
but at the same time it's we also can acknowledge that it's also not a permanent state, because um, it might kind of like in the moments when our kind of like brain is wired and we are in this fight or flight response, um, any this anxious experience feels permanent. It feels like it will never leave us, right? But then if we really look back on previous times when we were in similar situations and we thought like, okay, this can never get better, we can observe certain fluctuations that happened
mm-hmm,
afterwards. So if there is anything permanent in this journey, is the fact that things change,
mm-hmm,
meaning that even if when we are having those types of very uncomfortable sensations where we are super tired and yet we cannot fall asleep, they are not going to be there forever. At
mm-hmm,
some point, like maybe we don't even know, like maybe in a couple of hours things can change, right? And things, we can start seeing things differently, right? So allowing space for that unpredictability to be there, and realizing, you know what, hey, right now this sucks,
mm-hmm,
and there's nothing I can do about it. I cannot make this feeling go away, but let's see what happens
mm-hmm,
in 1 hour, in next day, whatever, right? So this way we are practicing acceptance, but we are also reminding ourselves of the changeable nature of those experiences. And maybe another kind of aspect, like during those periods when it feels like when we feel so kind of like trapped with this sensation, sometimes, and this is not a rule or this kind of like strong like prescription, or this is what you should do, right? But what I found helpful is to, after like when it starts to feel very frustrating, very kind of irritating, to change the surroundings just for a while. Sometimes it can help us like reset this mental state that we are in. If especially if we've been staying in bed for hours, getting like so exhausted with just feeling all those like thoughts and feelings going on inside of us. And sometimes just changing the location, even if it's just for 5 minutes, it can already help us like reset how we view things, and then we can come back to bed at any time. But what I found helpful, that in the most difficult moments, even just like taking like a brief walk around like living room and so on, that can actually bring in a little bit new experience. I don't know if that's helpful for this person, but yeah, I can really relate to this
mm-hmm.
experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I noted it while we were speaking, so I don't forget to talk about this. But this was so incredibly helpful for me because at the beginning of my insomnia, I literally spent like 12 hours at night in bed, and I was literally scared to get up from my bed. I was so afraid, like because I was thinking I can't get up from the bed. because what if I would miss the moment I would otherwise fall asleep if I was laying
Mm.
in my bed, right? And so many times I was laying in my bed and just until the morning and still not falling asleep. So really getting up, just change the settings for a while. It was even if it was just sitting by the window for a while, or just having a glass of water, or just use the bathroom, or just anything literally. It was incredibly helpful. Later on I even allowed myself to watch TV because I thought at the beginning like, "Oh, I can't watch TV because this is too triggering, this is too exciting," right? But I have to say that watching TV in the middle of the night, ideally some funny show, was really the story of my insomnia recovery, because it helped me to it basically didn't matter how tired, upset, or angry I am, or angry I was, they always say something funny that made me laugh. And when I laughed, I was sending the basically the message back to my brain like, "Hey, this is safe. This is absolutely fine," right? So I just wanted to encourage you, Annie. Don't be afraid to change the settings for a while. And another thing was, it was like really groundbreaking knowledge. When we have these all nighters, um, the sleep happens no matter what. Even if we are not aware of it, the sleep, our brain takes what it needs to function the next day, right? Of course, when we are literally paralyzed by fear, we don't take a notice. When we are in the mindset like, I had sleep last night, I'm not able to function the next day, and we stay the whole day, not only the whole night, but also whole day in the bed, on the couch. We literally just a step back from our life. But even when we have a challenging nights, we need to start to engage step by step, slowly, to start to do things during the day. So I hope this was helpful, Annie. And yeah, maybe we can answer a couple more questions.
Mhm.
And we have a question from Marco Kononen. I wake up every night. I have fear no more, but I can't go back to sleep. I lay down and listen to your podcast or read a book. When I wake up, my head hurts and I know that I haven't slept long. I get up 9 or 11 a.m. I'm laying too long in bed. I feel better in the morning when I do this. What should I do? Lay in bed or get up? So maybe we have been talking about it right now a little bit. But any additional thoughts on this topic, Ali?
Yeah, I would say that it's first of all, to me that sounds like, a nice kind of like progress, in the sense that there is already no more this fearful reaction. There's just this kind of like maybe alertness when it comes to awakenings, and that might also like still kind of keep sleep a bit more elusive. And this is usually how hyperarousal dissipates. As I said earlier, it doesn't go like fear doesn't go from 100 to 0. It's more like it goes through a transformation where sometimes it can get replaced with milder and milder forms of hyperarousal. So hyperarousal is not just like fear and anxiety. It can be anger, frustration. It could be sadness. It could be even excitement. Excitement can
Mhm.
keep us awake, right? And it's a form of hyperarousal, even though we interpret it positively in some sense. But sometimes even the state of alertness without having any strong emotional reaction can be also a form of hyperarousal. Those are the ones which I consider to be more kind of like a milder forms. And this to me often shows that the recovery process is like already kind of like nicely developing. But it might still, in terms of like the sleep outcome, it might not still look the way we would like it to look, and that's also okay. The key here is to create space for this transitory experience as well, because when we start uh, kind of like interpreting this experience negatively and think like, oh, it's wrong of me to wake up at night and then take a long time to fall asleep, then every time when we wake up, instantly that perspective already kicks in our this vigilance response, and we already kind of like begin to we become more alert, and therefore it kind of like recreates the same experiences over and over and over. So I would probably look into what is my current relationship with this experience. What am I not allowing here? Can I actually make it okay for me right now to wake up at night and take as much time as I need for sleep to happen, right? And another thing is that about getting up, it all comes down to the underlying like motive and what is the expectation, right? So if we think that, oh, I should start getting up at, like, let's say earlier, so that I will sleep better the next nights, then it's already, we are applying more pressure. So the decision to when to get up becomes more of a sleep effort, because like we feel like, oh, it's very important to have a specific time when I should get up that would somehow affect the outcome of the next night. And when we think in those terms, when we attach a sleep outcome to that decision making, that can make things tricky. So it doesn't really matter if we are forcing ourselves to stay until 11 a.m. or we are forcing ourselves to wake up really early. If we have this specific sleep outcome in mind when we are making that decision, that can actually create more pressure on us, make us think more about sleep. But when we make that, when we realize that it doesn't really matter when we get up, meaning that when we are not really attributing any specific outcome to that particular decision, and we realize that, you know what, I can choose whenever whenever I want to get up, and kind of like exclude sleep from this decision making equation, then we actually thinking less about sleep. So our decisions become more about either practical kind of like aspect, like common sense. Let's say if I have I have to get up to go to work, right? It makes sense that I will wake up earlier. So that the decision to wake up earlier comes not from me trying to somehow manipulate the recovery process, but it actually comes from common sense. Like, well, I have to be at work at 8, so therefore I will wake up at 7, for example, right? Similarly, when I realized, you know what, actually it feels nice for me to stay a little bit longer, and that allows me to actually enjoy my days even more, then there is nothing wrong about staying a bit longer. So I hope that this response creates a little bit maybe clarity for this person. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You frame it really, really nicely. And basically, it's all about the self kindness. And however, when I my first like really go-to answer was like to having some kind of a structure in the day could be helpful. Because I'm just going from my own experience, like from the beginning when I was laying 12 hours in bed, for me it was 12 hours of chasing sleep, right?
Yeah.
So with this mindset of like, oh my goodness, I have to stay as long as possible in bed to maximize my chances of falling asleep, then this was not really helpful. That's why the next logical step would be to make the sleep window just more narrow, right? Just to spend it like this normal like 7-8 hours if we just stay in bed, and this would be my window where I allow myself to rest. I don't want to frame it like let's go to sleep, because this feels pressuring, right? I'm going to bed, I have to sleep here, right? Let's frame it just to rest. And when we are in this kind of mindset, I'm just allowing myself to rest, to stay here, and if I can't sleep, I this is just a way of befriending wakefulness for me. Then it will be for us easier and easier, and we open kind of like with resting, we open the gate to the hypersleep, and when we are in the sleep state, and when we allow it, don't judge it, we open the gate to the deep sleep. So let's answer last question today, and this is from Pradyum Nahata. Hi, just came across this channel. Does this approach work for people who fall asleep fine but wake up 5 to 6 hours in at 4 a.m.? No stress is involved, and my sleep still gets cut off. So what are your thoughts, Ali?
Yeah, I would say that understanding like what this kind of like teaching or philosophy is really about. It is about learning to not be afraid of experiences
Mm-hmm.
related to sleep, and many people can have different experiences. Some people can have like fear surrounding the initial falling asleep. This is when like people usually experience onset insomnia, and then there are people who are more experience this maintenance insomnia or waking up like in the early hours and then not being able to like fall back asleep. And regardless of what the each type of like this insomnia is, the teachings like of acceptance, allowing things to happen, not judging ourselves for it, they are pretty much universal. There could be like nuances in a sense that, you know, for a person who is like more afraid of like waking up at night, uh, focusing more on normalizing awakenings as such, changing the way we look at them, like seeing that hey, actually everyone wakes up at night to some degree, and some people they just don't remember those moments. Some people remember them, but it is our how we interpret this moment, how we look at it. That's what later on defines how we experience that moment. If we defined awakenings as something very negative, we instantly go into this frustration mode, self-criticism, and it's like, oh my god, like this is happening again, what is wrong with me, and blah blah blah, all this kind of like negative self-talk. Then of course it kind of like fuels the cycle, so next time we are even more vigilant about waking up, right? So the way to kind of like unravel, undo this fear cycle is by actually learning to experience those early awakenings in a different way, in a more friendly way, right? And for
Mm-hmm.
someone with onset issues, it's more about like letting ourselves time to for sleep to happen at any moment, whether it's like earlier at night, later at night, it doesn't really matter, right? So really acceptance is all encompassing. It can be applied to any aspect of our experience. So from that, from what I just now shared, to me this is like really a really kind of like a helpful approach,
Mm-hmm.
even to those kind of like maintenance issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Ali. And there is just one last question that, okay, but you just responded. That makes sense. We'll try and enforce this in my life. Excited to see what happens. Wonderful.
Yeah,
And
lots of work with this. Yeah.
yeah, just there is one just very last comment that I will just briefly answer from Hurihan. I'm sorry for mispronouncing it probably. Reishi mushroom, the first thing in lifetime of insomnia to work. I literally didn't sleep all night for weeks. Now normal 6 to 7 hours sleep. I would just say that when we have insomnia and we are struggling so much, we always go and look for this magical tincture that will help us to sleep. But and we always find something, right? For me, once it was this kind of specific pill, then it was like this specific meditation. But I have to say, like every time after a certain time they failed me, right? So and it happened the moment when I started to rely on it. Okay, I will take these, I will do this ritual, I will listen to this meditation, and eventually it started to fail me in a way like it stopped working. And this is a very similar experience for many people who go through insomnia. They find these magical treatments and eventually it doesn't work. And this could be anything. This could be reishi mushrooms, this could be like the pills, it could be the CBTI. It's not a really one substance that will make us sleep forever, right?
It's some
So
external factor which we kind of like delegate to.
exactly. And this is what matters. It's the delegation. Like, okay, it can happen like at one time, like it helps us to fall asleep, right? Because we delegate it. But when we started to rely on it, when this is the moment, somewhere along the way we start to doubt the process, like is this really true, I'm over this. And when we start to doubt it, the old fears and the anxieties and the old thinking patterns just creep back in, and we find ourselves again in the cycle of insomnia. That's why the education and knowing what and why is happening. Understanding that sleep is a passive process. We don't have to do anything for it to happen is the most helpful thing that will helps us to sleep for a lifetime. So this is what I wanted to share, and I thank you, Alina, for being here, for giving your wonderful advice. If I don't see you or meet you until Christmas, I wish you a very Merry Christmas,
Thank you.
and
Merry Christmas to you too,
thank you
and to
so much.
everyone who's
Yeah, and thank you everyone for being here today, for posting really wonderful questions. And I'll be here also the next week with Coach Chris. And yeah, thank you so much for today. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.